Story RH, the podcast that makes a long story short.
Welcome to all.
History is made of stories.
In this episode, we'll be exploring why companies adopt management fads.
Like all trends, management fads are based on collective belief spread largely by people specialists refer to as trendsetters, from international consulting firms to gurus who claim to be experts and social media influencers.
They're most often salespeople who capitalize on our fears and fantasies using recognized sales techniques. But if you're not fooled by their manipulative, profit-seeking ways, it's worth asking the question, why do trained business professionals adopt management fads? What's the story?
We're going to focus on 4 reasons, though there are probably others.
First, companies are facing the same structural trends in economic context.
All companies are impacted by the ups and downs of their environment. So, while you can't compare the difficulties faced by a global luxury group and a local, industrial SME, certain major trends span continents and cross borders to encompass all businesses, impacting all companies and their ecosystems.
For example, the COVID crisis was a rude awakening, reminding us that structural phenomena shape the outlook for all companies and force them to confront the same types of problems. The same goes for the geopolitical balance of power, the macroeconomic context, demographics, the supply of natural resources, and new technologies.
So it's easy to pull from what salespeople call insights to highlight ideas about these far-reaching problems shared by executives worldwide, especially since contingency theory studies have demonstrated that the structural characteristics of a company's environment have a significant impact on its own structure.
The second reason that leads companies to adopt trends is the complexity of the problems to be solved, and these problems stem not only from the environment, but also from the innate complexity of the situations companies must manage.
For example, they have to combine organizational models that promote efficiency and productivity with those that foster innovation and adaptation. Over the past 40 years, management trends have mostly aimed to reconcile these two seemingly opposing methods.
Faced with such complexity, companies are sometimes tempted by oversimplification. This is the third reason behind the spread of management fads.
The world, people, and even companies are naturally complex, which means that to understand them, you have to be able to think about complexity, establish ties between things, develop a big picture view, and look to the future.
But we don't have time for all that. The business world needs quick decisions and implementation, which leaves professionals facing a paradox.
It would be best to take time to think things through before jumping into action, but our protective reflexes push us to oversimplify.
It's a sort of tyranny of the tangible, if you will, or cognitive biases, which together create a dangerous cocktail that fosters the rise of oversimplified trends.
The fourth and final reason is tied to our lack of memory and our preference for the familiar.
Lack of diversity exacerbates the risk of adopting a uniform representation of problems and therefore a single way of thinking about solutions.
Especially since the normative risks and constraints we're facing don't encourage us to adopt dissident ways of thinking or venture outside the box.
We ignore the truth and convince ourselves that we've reinvented the wheel every time we have an idea.
As you can see, there are plenty of reasons to adopt management fads. Nothing is as predictable as the continued existence of trends.
The problem isn't that they exist, it's that people adopt them blindly, encouraging others to lazily do the same without exercising any sort of critical thinking.
To recap, companies adopt management fads not only as a result of sales techniques, but also due to 4 major factors. 1. Companies all face the same structural trends and economic context. 2. The intense complexity of part of the problems they have to manage. 3. The temptation to oversimplify to overcome complexity. 4. The lack of diversity and memory, leading to uniformity of thought. Is that right?
Exactly right. Way to make a long story short. Story RH, the podcast that makes a long story short.